Hello math friends, and welcome to the next video in our decimal place value lesson. You need to have seen the assembly video before you watch this one. So if you haven't watched that assembly video, please stop this one and go back and watch that. But once you've seen that, you know that you have all those little doors that we folded. And 3 of them look like these. I want you to find the one that says 100 million. 100 million. And I want you to open that door up to the inside. So you're looking at the inside of the door. And we're going to write some notes in here about 100 million. So the first thing I want to show you is what the number 100 million looks like. It is 100, comma, 000, comma, 000. So there is 100 million, and this is called standard form. If you want to write in other forms, I'm going to show you those as well, but let's put standard form first. And let's go ahead and say that 100 million is the 9th place to the left of a decimal. And so let me go ahead and write decimal form for you. Decimal form looks exactly like standard form, except we can put a decimal there. And that's where the decimal has to go for 100 million. You could also add all the zeros out here that you want to add in decimal form. That's perfectly fine. Or you can leave them off, either way. Let's write this one in fraction form. And just bear with me here. You'll start to see a pattern as we work through our little doors. So here's fraction form. We write our 100 million. And the only thing we can put as a denominator is a 1. 100 million over 1 is equal to 100 million. You've got word form. We don't have to write that again. Other than we need to give the name. It would not have to be a 1 in this place right here. We could put any number from 1 to 9 in there. But this number is called 100 million. So let's go ahead and follow our forms. And then I'm going to show you the new one today, the scientific form. Word form is just 100 million. Because we are using a 1 with all those zeros. So there are four forms really, if you count standard. Let me highlight those for you. There's standard form, decimal form, fraction form, word form. And here's the one that I've been promising to show you. Here's one called scientific form or scientific notation. I'm going to stick with the word form because that's what we've been using. But it's usually called scientific notation here. To write a number in scientific notation, or this number in scientific notation, I'm going to take the 1, and that is this one, And to do scientific notation, you always say times 10 because our number system is based on tens. So I take whatever digit is in the 100 million seat, it's a 1, so I put that there. It's always times 10. And then we're going to use a thing called an exponent. And you may or may not have seen these before. So let me first of all spell the word for you. An exponent is a little number that sits up here at the top. It's going to sit right in here. So we're going to say this is 1 times 10 to the 7th power. I'm sorry, 8th power. Goodness. 1 times 10 to the 8th power. So how did I know it's an 8? How did I know what my exponent is going to be? Here's how you know. You count the zeros. Go to your standard form, and you've got all these zeros lined up here. So here is a bunch of zeros. How many zeros are there in that box? There are 8. So that 8 becomes the 8. There are 8 zeros. And that becomes your exponent of 8 in scientific form. So the 1 is from the standard form also, times 10 with 8 zeros. And that is yet another form of numbers that you are supposed to know. When we are learning these, when you're in first, second, third grade, fourth grade, you just do standard form. And then you learn, and word form. And then you learn about decimal form and fraction form and expanded form and scientific form, because your math knowledge is growing and you learn all of these different forms. Okay, let's do another one. Let's find the door that says 10 million. And the first thing I'm going to do is give you standard form. So what does the number 10 million look like? Well, it's a 1 and a 0, and 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. So there is standard form of 10 million. Let's look at decimal form. I want to do scientific form last on all of these, so we'll come back there. So decimal form, again, that just looks like standard form, except you put your decimal in so that it's visible. And you could add zeros after the decimal if you want to or need to. How do you write 10 million in fraction form? Well, you write the standard form. The fraction form, it needs a denominator. And there's only one number in the world that you can put under there that will make it stay 10 million, and that's a 1. You could even make that what I call a ghost 1 if you want to, because the 1 doesn't have to be there. It can be there if you need it to be, like when we were doing working with fractions and we needed a top and a bottom, we used a 1 to hold that place. Word form is just 10 million. We've already got that really on the door. That's not going to change too much. So now let's write our new one. This is, to me, the toughest one. You may disagree with me though. So scientific form. In order to do scientific form, you need to be able to see standard form. Make sure you're looking at that. So you have a 1, and it's always times 10 because our number system is based on tens. And then I go back up here and I'm going to count my zeros. We've already written the 1 down, so let's count the number of zeros. And in this case, there are 7 of those, so that becomes your exponent. 1 times 10 to the 7th power. Now, if it were 20 million, you would have 2 times 10 to the 7th power. Whatever is in this seat goes here. And then your zeros make the exponent. Okay, let's look at the door that says 1 million. And let's write it in standard form first. 1 million. So that is a 1 with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 zeros. Decimal form is just standard form. And bear with me here because this is going to change when we get into the decimal places. I want you to see the pattern. And then you can add zeros if you need them. Fraction form is standard form, but we need a denominator, and it has to be a 1. Word form we've already got, but it's good practice to just put it in there. 1 million. You need to learn to spell these if you don't know how to spell them already. Notice it does not end in TH. It's 1 million. And then scientific form see if you can, even if you want to pause your video and see if you can write this by yourself. 1 always times 10 to the 6th power, because there are 6 zeros after that 1 in standard form. And that is the millions group. You notice that the exponent depends entirely on the number of zeros, and that the exponent is getting smaller as the number gets smaller. Okay, let's take a look at our thousands section. I'm going to start with 100,000. So find that little door and open it up, and here comes standard form. It is a 1 with how many zeros? 5. So decimal form will look just like that one. Except you can add decimals after that one. I'm sorry, zeros. You can add 1 decimal and zeros. I'm getting tired, guys. Fraction form. See if you can get it before I do. Not that we're in a race, but I'm trying to work slowly to give you a chance to think through it. 100,000, it needs a denominator, and that denominator has to be a 1. I'm going to skip word form because it is just what we have right here. Okay. All right, so scientific. So if I give you word form, can you give me these other forms? That's what we're working toward. That's why I did these indoors. If you're seeing the words 100,000, can you write these other forms without any help from me? So 100,000 is going to be 1 times 10, and you count your zeros. There are 5 of them. That is your exponent. 1 times 10 to the 5th power. All right, let's look at the 10,000s place. So standard form. When I was learning these, I knew if I could get standard form, I was home free. I could get any of them if I could see standard. It's 10,000. So decimal form is going to be 10,000, and there's the decimal, and then you could add all the zeros you want to out there. You could add 10,000 zeros and you're not changing the value of the number. That's the key. We have to add things that don't change the value of our number. So when you do that in fraction form, you take your standard form and give it a denominator. It has to be a 1. You can never put a 0 on the bottom of a fraction. That's illegal in math rules. A 1 is saying 10,000 divided by 1. It does not change the value of your number. Okay, here's the tough one. Can you give me scientific form or scientific notation for 10,000? It's 1 times 10 to the how many zeros? 4th power. You see that these exponents are gradually getting smaller because the number is getting smaller. The value of the number is decreasing. Okay, your 1,000 piece. In standard, we're getting back down into those smaller numbers that are a little more manageable. This time I want to go to scientific. Let's mix it up just a little bit. So we have a 1 times 10 to the how many? 3rd power. Decimal form. Is going to be standard form, a decimal, and then any zeros that you want to add, or you don't have to add any. That's okay. And then fraction form is going to be standard, but it needs a denominator of 1. Everything inside this door is equal. I want you to really understand what I'm saying there. You can write a number in any of those 3 forms and it means exactly the same amount. If I have $1,000, I can write it as standard, I can write it as decimal, I can write it as fraction or scientific, and I still have $1,000. Okay, here is the unit section, the ones, tens, and hundreds, and we're going to start with the largest, which is the 100. And you know how to write this in standard form. I would bet every single one of you can write the number 100 in standard form. These smaller numbers are not as difficult because we see them a lot. But can you write it in scientific form? And you may be thinking, why would I want to? Why would I want to take the number 100 and write it in this form? In science, you use scientific form a lot, especially in astronomy, in space science. You will need to know this if you ever take a course. Has 2 zeros, so it's to the second power. Decimal form. Can you visualize it before I write it? Is 100 point, and then if you want to add some zeros, you can. You can add as many as you want, and you're not changing the value of that number. How would you express it in fraction form? Hopefully you got it. You take standard form and put it over a 1. 10. I know you know how to write this one in standard form. But do you know how to write it in scientific form? There's standard. Here is scientific. One times 10 to the first power. You only have 1 0, so it's the first power. Decimal form. Can you do it without me? Sure you can. Look at how much you've learned today. And fraction form. Standard over a denominator of 1. All of these forms are equal to each other. They're just different forms of the same thing. It's like water is H2O, but it can be ice, it can be steam, or I can drink water. It's the same thing. It's just in different forms. All right, this one, believe it or not, is the one that throws people. So let's take it slowly. Let's do standard form first. 1. Scientific form. It's 1, always times 10 to the what power? How many zeros do you see in standard? There are none, so it's to the 0 power. That looks bizarre, I know. Decimal form. I want you to picture money on this one. If I tell you that I have $1, is that not the same as this? $1 with no cents. So there's decimal form. Fraction form is standard with a denominator of 1, and that's equal to 1. So we haven't changed the value in any of our forms. And those are your whole number values. We went all the way up to an exponent of 8 to the 100 millions place. And now let's look at our decimal values. So we need the green doors for this one. And let's start this time with tenths. Let me think about that a minute. Oh, yes, I think let's start with the smaller ones on this one since we're moving into the decimals. Okay. Do I no, I want to I'm sorry. I should have already thought of this, but I'm going to keep the same pattern that we're doing. Standard form. To write tenths, you need a decimal point, and tenths is the first place past the decimal. It's the first decimal place. Decimal form, as you can imagine, will look very much like standard form. The only difference is that this time you can add your zero in the front if you want. I like that leader zero because that lets me never overlook my decimal. But you don't have to put it there if you don't want to. Fraction. Be careful here. In fact, I am going to put word form. We've talked about this a little bit in one of our videos. If you can, actually we haven't yet, that's coming up. So let me go ahead and introduce you to that in word form. I did not record these videos in the right order, so I'm thinking that you've heard things that you haven't heard yet. I'm sorry. Word form is 1/10. That's how you say 0.1. You don't say 0.1, you say 1/10. Fraction. Once you get that, you can say 1/10. And you've got your fraction. So let's do scientific. Now this one is a little bit strange. It's going to be 1 times 10. That doesn't change. But in this situation, our exponent is going to be a -1. And what that tells me is, don't let it throw you, it simply means 1 decimal place. The minus sign is telling me that this is a decimal place and not in front of the decimal. It's saying that another way to say that is 1 after the decimal. Okay. Hundredths in standard form. Is 0.01. It's 2 decimal places. If you want to write it in decimal form, this is where we add those extra zeros if we need them or want them. So that would be out front in the ones place. Hundredth, TH, is 2 decimal places. Let's get word form, and then fraction form will be much easier to write. So you write it as 1/100th. And the fraction form is 1/100. Standard form, we know it's going to look a little strange. All standard form looks strange. But I'm sorry, scientific, not standard. I should not have done this video late at night, guys. I've worked a full day and I'm tired tonight. So scientific form is going to be the 1 times 10 always, and it's to the negative 2 because it's 2 places after a decimal. And let's write that. 2 places after the decimal. So you have all of your forms, including word form. Word form helps you get the fraction, or it helped me. If I could see word form, then my fraction was much easier for me to write. Thousandth. Thousandth in standard form is decimal, tenths, hundredths, thousandths. If you want to use the proper decimal form, which I personally like, I need that leader 0. There's tenths, hundredths, thousandths, and then you can use the leader out front to hold that place. That's the way I learned it. Word form is 1,000th. Fraction form, look at word form, is 1 over 1,000. The TH tells me that this is a fraction. Scientific form, the TH tells me that I'll have a negative exponent. I have 1 times 10, and since we're dealing with a TH, it's a negative 3 places. It's 3 after the decimal. So standard, decimal, scientific, word, and fraction. Then we have the 10,000th place. Standard. It's not 10,000, it's 10,000th. 10th, 100th, 1,000th, 10,000th. Let's go ahead and try scientific. Since I have a 1,000th, it is a negative exponent. So I have 1 times 10 to the negative 4. That means 4 after the decimal. Hopefully that's starting to make a little more sense. Decimal form, which is my favorite on this one, is your 10,000th, your standard, plus that leader 0. Fraction, let me drop down here and get word form first, and then we can do fraction, is 10 thousandths. But we have 1. I forgot to put my 1 in there. 1 10,000ths. So it's 1 over 10,000 in fraction form. Couple more and we'll be done with these. I know this is getting tiresome And actually I need to go down to hundred thousandths. I have mine in the wrong order. So your next door is hundred thousandths. In standard form, I have decimal, tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 10 thousandths, 100 thousandths. So scientific is going to be 1 times 10. How many places after the decimal? 5. So it's a negative 5. That means after the decimal, 5 places. And then if you want decimal form, you're going to put a 0 in your ones place and then your decimal parts. Word form, I have a 1 in the 10,000th seat. And so fraction will be 1 over, not 10 thousandths, 100 thousandths. Let me fix that. That should say 100 thousandth. And I bet you didn't make the mistake. I bet you wrote it correctly the first time. Okay, one more. And that is the millionths place. Now there are places after millionth, but I didn't want to run this in the ground, so I stopped at millionth, but you could keep counting on past millionth. So we have tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 10 thousandths, 100 thousandths, 1 millionth. Scientific form, I'm dealing with a 1 times 10, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 places after the decimal. So we can put that leader 0 and then our decimal piece. Word form is 1 millionth. And so fraction form is going to be 1 over a million. One millionth. Okay, I'm going to stop this video because it's gotten rather long. And in the next video, we will practice using these skills just a little bit. I am going to show you the assembly of this line actually in the next video, and then we'll practice using these skills. So get all of your little doors folded back up so that they're ready to attach to that anchor piece, and I'll see you in the next clip to show you how to do that. Bye-bye.